It began in the spotlight of a moment everyone expected to be cordial, the warm glow of studio lights, an audience seated in polite anticipation, and Oprah Winfrey offering her trademark introduction while Denzel Washington, calm and composed, took his seat on the plush chair across from her. But beneath the scripted questions lay the undercurrents she never intended to stir. When she asked, with a hint of playful skepticism in her tone, about Denzel's well-publicized Christian faith and his habit of discussing God in interviews and at awards shows. A curious mix of admiration and slight mockery, framed as light banter, and though Denzel paused, it was a quiet, measured silence, the kind that happens when a man who has built his career on conviction recognizes the moment has shifted. Oprah smiled, leaning forward, expecting a punch line or a softened confession, but Denzel's eyes sharpened, not in anger, but with the quiet force of faith unafraid of scrutiny, and he simply asked, "Do you doubt God's relevance in our lives, Oprah?" The audience gasped at the pivot, the laughter died, and for a heartbeat the studio felt as if suspended, a living prayer of stillness, while Oprah recovered, blinking, searching for the banter thread she believed they were sewing together. Then Denzel, steady and unwavering, began to speak by delivering not a sermon but a testimony, about moments on film sets when he felt guided beyond his own talent, when improbable careers bloomed, when decisions made at crossroads were shaped by an unseen hand. He spoke in anecdotes, not dogma, telling of the time he chose a role that looked risky on paper but one that changed the arc of his life and impacted thousands. And when Oprah tried to interject with a wry joke about Hollywood's self-help gurus, Denzel calmly smiled, paused her, said, "This isn't self-help, this is my truth." The audience leaned forward. In that pause, Oprah's expression flickered, the playful mask shifting to curiosity, and she asked again, this time softer, whether his faith had ever made him question himself publicly, and Denzel answered with grace, recalling the backlash and whispers when he thanked God at award ceremonies, when he'd risked the chilling silence of celebrity circles to stand by his beliefs. He recounted the times he'd felt alienated, but how, even then, his heart found strength in that same belief, which he described not as a performance but as a lifeline. At each revelation, Oprah's posture softened, the early mischief replaced by engagement. She leaned in, nodding, as the conversation turned from confrontation to confession in real time, until her laughter left her, until no quip could follow. The studio lights dimmed, the audience silent, and Denzel's voice brought a hush so deep it felt sacred. The faith of a man unbowed, the journey of conviction on full display, unadorned by celebrity gloss, merely real. Oprah sat back, visibly affected, her eyes shining with unexpected emotion, as the conversation circled to the role of faith in art, how belief drives honesty in performance, and how the theater of life needs its own script written in humility. Denzel spoke of his mother's prayers, of nights on set when he prayed for focus, for safety, for clarity, not for fame but for integrity. And as his words wound through the studio, Oprah's hand brushed her chest, and she took a breath, as if absorbing a truth beyond the stage. By the time the segment ended, she was no longer interviewing an actor, she was witnessing a man's soul laid bare, and her final question was a simple, reverent invitation, "Denzel, what do you want people to feel when they hear you speak your faith this way?" And he answered, "I want them to feel they're not alone, that faith isn't weakness, it's the backbone of courage." Pause. A beat passed longer than any applause. The audience rose in a standing ovation, not for a star, but for the testament of a life lived in alignment, and Oprah wiped moisture from her eyes, found her voice again only in silence, the kind born not of loss but of shared witness. As the cameras cut, the credits rolled, and the studio emptied into corridors lit by reflection, both host and guest carried with them an exchange that could not be packaged or edited, a moment when mockery met grace, when celebrity theater bowed to authenticity, and when the price of faith was paid in full by a silence that held more weight than any applause. And long after the episode aired, clips went viral, commentators debated sincerity, and many said they saw Oprah changed, at least for a moment, by the quiet power of Denzel's response, a response that not only left her speechless but awakened a conversation about belief, doubt, and the courage to stand unguarded on live TV. And while television moved on, as it always does, shifting to the next headline, the next guest, the next curated conversation, the echo of that moment didn't vanish. It burrowed into the minds of viewers across continents who had watched expecting charm and got conviction, who had anticipated entertainment and received something almost sacred, and in churches, classrooms, podcasts, and coffee shops, people began referencing it not as a viral clip but as a cultural turning point, one where faith was neither commodified nor concealed, but presented raw, firm, and unflinching, not to convert but to declare, and Denzel, for his part, refused to capitalize on the viral attention, refusing the parade of late-night requests to explain the moment, or recreate it for ratings, choosing instead to step back, to let the conversation belong to those who needed it most, the ones uncertain if they could talk about their beliefs at work, the ones mocked at dinner tables, the ones afraid that strength and faith could not coexist, and in that restraint, Denzel did something even more powerful than speech. He allowed silence to become the amplifier of truth. Meanwhile, Oprah, ever reflective, reportedly spoke to her team about the unexpected vulnerability she'd felt, about how unprepared she was for an answer that didn't aim to impress but to challenge, and privately, she revisited her own complicated relationship with spirituality, one shaped by years of building a media empire in a world that often treats certainty about God as a form of naivety. And though she never publicly apologized or clarified her tone, those closest to her noted a shift, a softness in future interviews, a deeper respect when topics of faith arose, and perhaps, a humble acknowledgement that even icons can misstep, can learn in real time when they meet someone unwilling to dilute who they are for comfort's sake. Elsewhere, pastors referenced Denzel's words in sermons, youth mentors played the clip in workshops, and skeptics found themselves rewatching it not because they agreed, but because something in the stillness of his answer unsettled them in ways they couldn't dismiss. The steadiness, the refusal to play along, the audacity to prioritize soul over spotlight. In Hollywood, where image is currency and beliefs are often worn like seasonal fashion, many were stunned by his composure, not theatrical, not evangelical, but deeply human, and some of his peers, quietly, reached out to say thank you, revealing how they too had felt the need to hide their faith, or only speak it when wrapped in humor or irony, and Denzel's refusal to do so sparked a ripple of courage in unexpected places. Meanwhile, cultural critics split down familiar lines, some praising him as a beacon of moral grounding in a drifting age, others accusing him of bringing religion into a space meant for neutrality, but no one denied the power of the exchange. It was now embedded in the cultural memory of an audience hungry not just for distraction, but for depth. Denzel never sought to become a spokesperson for Christian identity in entertainment, and in interviews that followed months later, he clarified with typical calm, I wasn't trying to make a point. I was answering honestly. That's all. And perhaps that's why the moment endured, because it was not manufactured, not even particularly eloquent, but real, unguarded, and courageous in the face of subtle ridicule, and in that courage, people saw something ancient and necessary, the truth that when the world scoffs, sometimes the holiest response is not to argue, but to stand still, to breathe, and to speak from the deepest place without needing applause, and in that way, Denzel Washington didn't just leave Oprah speechless, he reminded a fractured world what it looks like when grace stands its ground.